How many times have you lost your keys all to figure out that they're sitting on the counter right in front of you where you've been looking all along but just haven't had a chance to really focus in on where they were and see them amidst all the rest of the junk that you have? Or let's see, how many times have you run into somebody that you've met a number of occasions, but you can't seem to remember that person's name for the life of you? It's right on the tip of your tongue, but you can't remember it. Therefore, you can't introduce them to the other people that you're with. Memory can be a real problem for many of us, and we face a number of obstacles in remembering. Some of the greatest obstacles that we face in remembering are some of the greatest obstacles we face in any listening situation that's related to our attention. And that is, we choose to place our attention elsewhere. And that's a pretty basic description of why we have difficulty with remembering. But there's a whole lot more to it than just that. We're going to be discussing today the memory systems, 3 primary memory systems, which are interrelated. They're not separate. We begin with the immediate memory, and then we transition into your short-term memory, and then we'll be talking about your long-term memory. Now, Mnemosyne is the Greek goddess of memory, and she is the mother of the 9 muses. And many times when people are talking about memory, they recall images and discussions of her from Greek mythology, and she's thought to have inspiration for the poets. Now, can you even remember how to pronounce her name? You know, it's difficult to remember something from which we have no pattern, no existing knowledge for. It becomes very difficult. For example, if you've been in a class before in which you have no previous experience with that subject matter, you're going to be more challenged to remember and to recall the information that you're learning in that class than if you're taking a class that you are familiar with. So you see that even just in discussing Mnemosyne, it may be very difficult for you to remember how to pronounce it. Now, we struggle to deal with our memories in a way that's advantageous to us, and so what we need to be thinking about through this week's lessons is we need to be focusing on how we can engage in skill building in the 3 areas of our memory systems. And then we're also going to be talking more generally about how we can develop our memory through some good everyday practices. But we are definitely going to be talking about these 3 distinct memory systems. Memory is affected by a number of different factors. The self-talk that we engage in, our intrapersonal communication, affects our memory. Specifically, it's how we begin to make associations between things that we are hearing and understanding and perceiving. And so our self-talk can be very important in that association that we make. Also, other information that you're exposed to at the same time has a big impact on your memory. Context matters. So if you are hearing a word for the first time, maybe you have no existing definition for that word, but because it's in the context that you understand it, you now understand the term itself, and so you're better able to remember it and recall it. Now, the characteristics of the language and the sequence of the words has an impact on syntactic context, but context can be just more than syntactic context. What you're doing while you're listening also has an impact on what you remember. How many times have you been taking a test and you come across a question and you think to yourself, wow, I remember in lecture, the professor was talking about it, they were saying this and that. Oh, yeah, that's the right answer. And it's actually, you're able to recall that situation, what you were doing, where you were, and that helped you to be able to remember the fact or the idea. What happens in between when you input that information into your memory and when you recall it also has an impact. For example, the longer the amount of time that lapses between input and recall, the less likely you're going to be able to recall that information. For example, I may have met someone 15 years ago, but 15 years has passed, and if I haven't seen them in the past 15 years, if I haven't had a chance to talk to them on a regular basis, even if they made a pretty good impression on me 15 years ago, it may be quite difficult for me to recall their name or any specific information about them. Also, the nature of the information that's already stored in your memory and how it's organized, which we're going to talk about Now we're going to begin talking about your immediate memory system. Stimuli are continuously passing through our immediate memory, meaning that you're exposed to such a wide variety of stimuli constantly. You can't get away from it. You're bombarded by it. Think of just driving down the road, how many different billboards you see, signs you see, cars passing by you, you're listening to the radio, maybe even you're talking to a friend. Think about all that stimuli that's passing through your immediate memory system. And what do you do with most of that stimuli? Nothing. You lose it in a matter of seconds. You can kind of think of your immediate memory system as the warm-up circle for going up to bat. And it's where you have the opportunity to begin to remember if you so choose. But like I said, most of the information that passes through your immediate memory will actually not be recalled later on because it's not necessary. You're exposed to a number of stimuli that just don't have any long-term impact on you. Your immediate memory acts basically as a filtering device, and this is affected by your attention. And because your immediate memory is the first step really in the memory process, you begin with your immediate memory and then you transition to short-term and then long-term. Attention has a big impact as a filtering device for your entire memory system. And what you choose to pay attention to, what stimuli you attend to, and how you rank its importance, how you evaluate it, is going to have a huge impact on all your memory systems. But the immediate memory has limited capacity, meaning that it only lasts a few seconds, and either you transition that information into your short-term memory or you basically lose that information. And we're not like a computer in the sense that we can recall everything that's typed into us. So we do have a limited capacity, and the immediate memory system is a picture of that that limited memory capacity. There are ways, though, that you can improve your immediate memory system, and they deal with your attention and how you can focus your attention. You can focus your attention rather than letting it wander. Daydreaming, thinking about our to-do list later on in the day has a big impact on whether or not we're able to focus on what we're listening to at this given time. When you know the importance of recalling information, then you can intentionally focus on that information and you can resist those psychological distractions and any other distractions in the environment that may come your way. However, if you're not really classifying that information as being important or vital or necessary for the future, you may choose to let your attention wander, and therefore you're not going to be able to recall that information later. Also, you focus your attention on key ideas, the most important messages. For example, in class, just like last week when we were talking about note-taking, that can be a way that you can actually help to focus on key ideas, because in outlining you write down key ideas, and that's one form of note-taking. Notes can help you to transition actually from your immediate memory to your short-term memory, because it can engage then in rehearsal, because you can go back and reread that information later. And if you think about it in the workplace, you really have to decipher between what's key information and what is unimportant information. If you've ever gone to a training session of any kind and you've been given a list after list after list of things that you need to do, you really have to think about what's most important, what is key, what do I need to remember, what do I need to recall. Maybe there is a web link to this form and I don't have to remember everything on the form if I can just recall what the web link is. Or if I can create some way to remember this data later on, which we'll talk about in short-term and long-term memory, then that can be vital to me. But I need to know if it's important and I need to focus on it so that I can transition it. Next, we're going to begin talking about how we look at short-term memory, understand short-term memory, and improve upon it.